Hey everybody, welcome back to Keeping It Real with Tiff and Carl. I'm Carl Rabin,
I'm Tiffany Salcido.
and today we want to talk to you about a very relevant topic that has come up a lot in our conversations with folks around, in our profession and what we do. You probably see it and feel it a lot in the organizations and in the offices that you engage in, and that's burnout. Right. And so, it's really been something that has been on a lot of people's minds when I bring it up, when I show, if I have slides to it, when I show it to people, oh yeah, yeah, what do we do with that? Right. How are you experiencing it, Tiff? What's going on?
I'm burnt out right now. Currently,
Yeah.
currently and effectively burnt out. I was doing some research the other day to find out who could pay me several $100,000 for the next few years to make bread and homemade yogurt, and there was no takers. But um, I'm feeling very disconnected from many things, and all I want to do is like nest and vibe, and this working for a living is really getting in the way of all of this. And so I'm in a space and I recognize it. I am not finding joy in many of the things that I usually really enjoy. I'm finding resentment in its place. And so I'm trying to work through all of that before it gets too deep, you know. Burnout sometimes like a little infection. You see it festering, and if you let it go, it'll eat up your the whole self, like a flesh-eating bacteria. How's that for a visual? Takes over everything.
Yeah. That's a little harsh. It's a harsh visual, but it's
But
absolutely
it's
true.
true. Yep.
Yep. It's something that, a lot of people recognize and they identify and they want to do something about. But, when you hear people, oh, practice self-care and okay, cool. Yeah. But, what can people do to practice self-care, right? What does it mean to practice self-care? And, just understanding the term burnout, why are people feeling that, right? And so that's something that comes up. I mean, I hear you. There's the idea of being in the grind, right? And every day, moving forward. And, there's a lot of stuff about what we do that I really love. And then there's some things that kind of can be challenging, right? And so, when you think of that idea of burnout, what comes to your mind? What's the definition, or how do what do you experience? How do you experience it?
When when I when I think about burnout, I think of it as you're just so over it. Like it's not there's times where people are stressed and they're overwhelmed and they can kind of buckle in and say, okay, I'm stressed and overwhelmed. I'm going to figure this out. Um, and sometimes that stress can motivate them through their challenges. To me, burnout is just like the meme, the person where the whole building is on fire and they're just like, this is fine. This is fine. Where you can see the whole thing is on fire and you're just like, I'm just not interested in putting this fire out. Like let it all burn down, just emotionally, physically, spiritually detached from the situation. Like where at one point you might have been very motivated to get in there with a bucket or a hose or a fire extinguisher and start putting stuff out. You're just like,
Yeah.
let it all burn. I've had a good run. That's to me what burnout. I mean, I guess with fire, that's a very good analogy because that's
Yeah.
to me what I imagine when I'm thinking about burnout. Like it's all falling apart. Let it burn down. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because Gallup identifies, the engagement survey they do every year. And I think the last numbers were 30% of American workers are engaged at work, and they define being engaged as using discretionary efforts. So doing that little extra when things are important, right? When they need to be. So putting the fire out, getting everyone out, right? And getting the hoses and running into the fire and things like that. But then, so that means that the idea of disengagement is not using discretionary effort, which is, coming to work, punching the clock, doing, you know, what you think you need to do in the bare minimum, and taking your break. Hey, I come to work every day on time. I take my breaks on time. I don't steal any time. I do my to-do list and then I'm done. Right.
Hmm.
And, that's actually, defined as being disengaged, which a lot of folks were taught that's how you do your job. Right. And so it's, it's something that, a lot of people are in that moment where 52% of American workers are just there to punch the clock and a lot of them probably suffer from burnout, right? When you think of burnout in the clinical terms, right? Um, it's part of the compassion and quality of life, right? Scale, right? So we have compassion satisfaction, right? And compassion fatigue, and it's one of the elements of compassion fatigue, right? Especially in helping professions. Right. So that's compassion satisfaction is I put in a hard day. I put in a lot of work. I leave the job exhausted, but I know that I did something that was meaningful, that made a difference, where I'm supported by my team, and things like that, and I know that gets me ready for the grind tomorrow, but I know that it's something that's worth it. Right. And when burnout's the exact opposite, right? Nothing I do really makes a difference, doesn't really move the needle, right? And how would I know if what I do moves the needle? Because, I'm not being told, my supervisor doesn't really support me. I don't really feel like we're a team, right? There's so many different elements of what that is. And I just feel like I'm doing redundant work or I'm doing work that I don't see the fruits of my labor. And if I don't see, it producing anything, then what's the point of me putting any extra effort out there? Especially when, if I'm in that culture where my boss says, "Hey, no news is good news," right? So, yeah.
Well, not only that, yeah, not only that, I think that we're coming off of this, like there's just a lot of things happening in the world, right? Like I'm not gonna I, like there's just a lot going on in the whole wide world. There's people getting murdered in our streets. There's, by our government. This is heavy, heavy, heavy. And we're seeing like all kinds of unrest. And this is all on the back heels of this pandemic, where at least in the first few years of the pandemic, I think that a lot of us were ready and able to kind of step in and help. Like, what can we do to help our companies going through, a huge transition where we don't know what the future looks like. And so, we were really all willing and able to come in and do what needed to be done because it was also emergent. And now, like the dust has settled, and companies, many companies and organizations are still asking like the same level of commitment of let's just all in. The workload is high, people aren't hiring anymore, the economy is not doing well. People who are looking for work can't get hired, and the people who are working are feeling overwhelmed because they're understaffed but they can't hire anybody. And so I think like the initial camaraderie and connection and like let's all hands on deck, let's figure this out together, has worn off, and now people are just tired, like dog tired. And then John Cotton, quoting John Cotton from the Green Mile, I'm just dog tired. And with that, like all of these demands and all of this give, 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 and then for what? Right? Pay has stayed the same. We're not seeing an increase in benefits. We're not seeing, if nothing else, we're seeing like our healthcare skyrocket. We're seeing our 401k suffer. So at the end of the day, like we keep putting all of this effort, and what's what's the payback? It's not just all about paying benefits, but like what are companies doing to support and encourage and give people the enthusiasm to continue, the resources and support that they need to continue at this level of performance in conditions that just are not conducive, right? It's too much. It's too much all at once. It's everything all at once. And I know a lot of us are kind of feeling the pinch of that. And it's to not get in the drama triangle. It's sometimes hard to not feel like victimized by all of these things. And I think that purpose part of it's huge as well, because as we're watching ourselves, again, as helping professionals specifically, we're doing all of this effort to try to make it where people have access to food and healthcare and housing and safety and mental health and all of these services that we provide. And the federal government is saying, yeah, you all kind of suck. We're not going to let you have food. We're going to make it harder for you to eat, and we're going to make it harder for you to access healthcare. And coming soon, we're going to start tackling, you know, all of these other support services that we have per people because we can't afford it. But here's a billion, quadrillion, gazillion, in my best Dr. Evil amount of money to ICE and other things that aren't really supporting like the common good for all people. You know what I mean? So I think that there's a lot of like, text of what the F are we doing right now? And so how do you keep going on your day to day? How do you show up on Monday and come to work and say, I'm about to give this gift when the person you're giving it to, it takes it, throws it out at some point, like there's a breaking point. Where do we give?
I hear you. And that's a concern for, for hopefully for most of us, right? And
Mm.
just thinking about where we are and the effort that I put into things, going to, how's it going to come to bear fruit in a positive way, not just for me, but for my community, for my teams, right? Absolutely. And so in the moment where we are right now in a global sense, that's what we're experiencing. But burnout's been around, even before, the factors of the pandemic, people coming together. You see historically over time, people come together, right? People
Right.
came together for World War I, World War II, right? Came together for a global pandemic. I mean, how many other people have, you know, um, dealt with a pandemic in America in their lifetime, right? That's the one we get. Other countries, they get more because they don't have as much, right? So they experience some of those pandemics a little bit more than we do. But, we did pull together. We did, you know, do what people needed us to do. We did stay in homes. We did work remotely. We did those things. And a lot of that because there was a burning platform, because we absolutely had to. And like
Right.
you said, now the dust is settled. It's not a have to as much as it's a, you know, what do we do? How do we move forward? And, it's a different dynamic. And you see that. And people have different needs, right? And just people want people want us to come to the office. Other people are like, I did pretty good outside of the office. And then that's definitely part of those dynamics that you see in what was called the job demands research model. Or I'm sorry, job demand resources model, right? And it talks about two factors, right? So job requirements, right? So the things that we have to do that we face at work. So the our idea of time, right, of workload, of our relationships, the environment that we work in, and the leadership that we have, right? These are just examples, right? So these are things that we have to deal with in different areas of business. Different organizations have different needs. I mean, an emergency room has a different uh, set of job requirements than a bookstore, right?
Mhm.
And so we have those in our context that we're dealing with. And so we have those. And then we have resources, hopefully. And the resources are what is put into place to be able to help us with the job requirements, right? And so there are factors that help us to accomplish our jobs in a way that does not produce stress, right? Because at the end of the day, what the jobs demand resources model measures is our idea of health and our idea of being motivated, right? So when we have a health um, pathway that compromises our health, it's because we don't have as many resources as we need in our jobs, right? When we have a pathway where we are more motivational, more engaged in what we do, it's because those resources are present and people are taking time to be able to provide those resources. So when I first looked at that model, I was like, okay, so resources, like systems and things like that. But to put it on our lens, resources are not just do we have the right systems in place? Do we have the right group of people in place, how about what are the things that we provide folks? Do we provide coaching? Do we provide a sense of career development, right? Do we have a culture that encourages people to connect with each other, to let people know that we actually care, right? One of the things I was reading up on was just the idea of in helping professions where you are dealing with people that are in existential crisis and are dealing with unresolved trauma, right? Long-term poverty is a traumatic event, right? It's not one of the aces, but it damn well should be, right?
Mhm.
Knowing where you're wondering where your next meal is or what couch you're sleeping on, that night to be able to get through, especially when there's no jobs, when there's no wage growth, right? Rent's going up, but wages aren't, right? And so all of those things like that, that can, add stress and strain. And us as helping professionals sometimes feel like, well, what can we do to stem the tide? And a lot of folks that we work with, they take it out on us as if we made the
Right.
we made the policies. We carry out what those folks in in Sacramento and Washington and in Bismarck and wherever else, in Minneapolis or St. Paul, right? They're that set the tone for what it is that we're supposed to do, and then we carry it out. And very often we're carrying it out in ways that does not provide the payoff that we're looking for. And not even, like I said, functionally, but how about as a team? How about
Mhm.
as your manager? Hey, do you have a moment? I just need to talk. Oh, well, I have a meeting right now, but there's an EAP program. Let me give you that number for that, or you can talk to HR, right? And it's really something where we seem to want to give functional resources when very often it's, do I feel like I'm in the right place to be supported, even when I'm going through a tough time? And
Right.
that's something that's so important. And that's definitely what you just talked about and what a lot of people are experiencing.
When I think about burnout, it really comes down to a math problem, for lack of a better word. If we're subtracting this, which is like all our time, effort, and energy into solving a problem, like what are we adding back to really kind of create some balance? And it can't just be self-care and
Yeah.
herbal tea.
Yeah.
It really comes back to what's the environment that we are working in? What's the thing that we're doing that kind of re-energizes or sustains people in doing the work? The job demands part of this entire model is all of those things that are the minus. What is the time, effort, and energy that is going into, again, whatever work it is that you're doing? So if we have more work than we have time, that's going to subtract energy. If we have all of this emotional labor or, again, exposure to the secondary trauma, that's going to drain us. That's going to be a minus. All of this urgency and everything has to be on time, or I don't have clear direction, or I can see people that have these very significant needs, and I don't know how or where I can connect them to resources to help them in those situations, or this constant change, change, change. We're doing this. No, we're doing that. No, we're doing this. No, we're doing that with no like understanding of what's happening in the background. Like all of that just drains people, and it's not sustainable because it's overwhelming. Right? You can't keep pulling from people without putting something back to help kind of find that balance in that equation. And so when we're thinking like, how do people work, how do we create resources? It's not about just having a more robust EAP program like you're talking about. It's not just, oh, we're having Sundays today to say thank you for all of this extra work that you've done. It really comes down to like, what are you willing to put back into that system that's going to sustain people? And so this means like having leadership that truly, truly does care about the people, not just the work that they're producing, but like, do you support me? Do we have trust with each other? Can I tell you when I'm burned out? Can I come to you and tell you I need some support without feeling judged? where do I get to make choices and make decisions for my own role? Like where do I get to make that executive decision without having to check in and not get in trouble for it later because it was emergent and something needed to change? Do we have enough people and do we have realistic timelines? Because if everything is urgent and I only have so much time in the day, like how the hell am I supposed to do it all and not beat myself up if everything is urgent? And so um, helping people develop skills and giving them adequate training. And by the way, when I say develop skills and adequate training, it's not just like, oh, let's just send people to training because whatever. Like, how are you supporting the training? How are you supporting that learning? How are you changing the environment? Um, I had an experience last week. This was so much fun. I traveled over 1,000 miles to get to this place and get there. And everybody had just found out 5 minutes before training that they had training that day. And so we had to start a little bit late because they had to, cancel appointments and reschedule things and move their whole day around because of this training that they got to go to. And it was a great training. It was a great training and it was a great relevant topic to them. But how many of them do you think were super engaged because they were pissed off that their whole day got ruined? So it wasn't even like an opportunity, like here's some training that's going to help you be better at your job. It was like ruin your whole start of your week so that you can come to this training and be resentful and not want any of it because nobody told you about it. Like that's the part that leads to burnout. So even though it can be a super relevant important topic that's going to help you do your job well, if it's not being communicated well and it feels like just another thing to do, then how do we expect people to really be connected to purpose and feel psychologically safe to be able to learn and grow when we're creating these conditions where people are just overwhelmed? Like the demands are so high and chronic, and our resources are always low and inconsistent or just symbolic. They are performative, they are not real. Like that is unsustainable. And I'm feeling that pinch right now. I'm feeling like what do I need to change because I'm in that space where I don't I'm not feeling connected. Like I love what I do. I do love what I do. I am not feeling connected to it. The strain of it is overwhelming the resources that I have. And that's something I have to acknowledge and work on. It happens to the best of us, my friends. Don't feel bad if it's happening to you. We all feel it at some point or another. It's about finding the tools and resources that are going to help you navigate through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so everything you just laid out, right? Being overworked and dealing with the stress and strain of not just the individuals that we interact with, but just overall the idea of who's there to support us, who's watching the watchman, right? Who's providing that support. That is such an important thing to think about globally. I mean, even if we were in a better economy, right? And we'd be facing still people would be burnt out. I mean, maybe not at a clip as much as a lot of people are feeling, but I think a lot of it, what we've just dealt with was an emotional thing where millions of Americans died, right? And people that if you didn't have somebody directly connected to you pass or get very sick, there's you don't even have to go to Kevin Bacon. It ain't 6 degrees, right? I mean, there's
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
that you dealt with. So coming out of that and people wanting to rush back to normal. And what is normal, right? What is normal? I had a county tell me, oh, we want people, we want to go back to normal. And I said, well, normal is what people are experiencing those last few years where they didn't have to pay for childcare, they didn't have to commute, and they could be just as productive from home. And now you're telling them that's no good. And that's an upheaval too, right? And that where people feel unappreciated. How do you have those conversations where you can have those needs being met in a way that is respectful and responsible rather than get her done, just deal with it, rub some dirt on it? And how do you help people feel like they're in the right place to want to put forth that extra effort? Whenever I work with admins, I teach a administrative assistant, series. And what I usually get from them is that we don't usually get training. and they
Mhm.
walk in, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong? So a lot of people, the training that they get is compliance training, right? And so people will walk in. And one of the things that I say right off the bat, whether I hear it or not, is first of all, this is a celebration of you. Nobody's in trouble. You're not here because of something that's done wrong. It's something because your county, your organization has identified something that they would like to support you in. And it was real cool because last couple of weeks, the county I was in, the program director who was in charge of all administrative services came in and gave that announcement the first 5 minutes of the class and let them know how much they're appreciated and how, we haven't done this before and we're going to do more of it because we want you all to feel appreciated as much as anybody else. And it's so true. I tell people, the admin are the first line of defense. They're the ones who are seeing folks walk through the door. They're the ones picking up the phone and, and representing the county. They're the first impressions. We've already talked about that. That's so important. So how do we make that, something that what's the opportunity? And like you mentioned, there's a couple things that were identified, for some of those resources, right? So reflective, supportive supervision, right? So an opportunity to have regular one-on-ones and check-ins with your supervisor to be empathetic and understanding, right? And to have them really try to be empathetic. You can't walk a mile in somebody's shoes, but you can at least try to understand why they're walking in their shoes, right? And what's the situation. Team cohesion, if you're whether your supervisor is supporting you or not, to have that team, to be able to have that connection. Harvard Business Review says if you have one person that you can talk to at work and you can just vent and let your hair down and just be honest and open, and they listen to you with empathetic, non-judgmental support, you're going to stay at the job longer, you're going to be more productive, right? These are things that we know happen. Psychological safety, as you mentioned, Tiff, which is going to be a conversation that we're going to have, as we go along, is what does it mean for me to be able to walk in and know that I can express myself in who I am, what I say, how I work, and not have a fear of judgment or reprisal, right? I can just be me and I can express myself in a place that allows me to know that I am in the right place to be who I want to be, right? Autonomy and decision making, absolutely, right? So being able to have that ability to make our own decisions and not feel like it's a pop quiz or a right or wrong, which, sneak peek supervisors, you guys can do that because we train our staff to talk to us in specific ways on how to solve their problems and how can we train them to solve their own problems, right? Or encourage them to do that, right? Training that is not just compliance, right? But understands the impact, right? People talk a lot about hard skills and soft skills, right? Hard skills are those technical skills and the things that we provide and how to provide them. The soft skills are how do we communicate with folks that we're not just throwing stuff at them, but we're doing it because we're interested in their best interest and in their development, whether it's a worker or a client or a customer, right? How do we do that in a way that, well, we gave them these, we gave them gift cards and they're not using them. Well, as Tiff and I experienced, last month in the conference we were at, most of the folks that were on the stage, when they asked them, what do you want from your worker? They said, we just want them to ask us how we're doing,
Mhm.
right? And if you can start there, how much easier will the communication, how much more honest, upfront, transparent will people be to people that they know actually give a damn about them, as opposed to, oh, I just got to meet with my worker and give them this stuff so I can get out of there. All right. Your worker's not supposed to be your PO. Right?
Right. Well, and like we can sit here and preach until the cows come home about how like workers should be with clients. We can talk about that all day long, but until our systems and our environment of how employees are treated changes, nothing's going to change. I there's just the way we've been doing business for so long is unsustainable, and it has to go beyond just words and affirmations. Like something has to like significantly change. And I know that that's a challenge, but I don't think it's impossible. So where we as people need to come together is that people part of it. Where do we reimagine how we're doing this work? Can we look at the demands and do it like a math problem? What are the things that are taking energy and enthusiasm and excitement away from us? And if I can't change those circumstances, how do I create a resource or a way to navigate through that very complicated system? Right? We got to rebuild the system. And sometimes it's going to be through the way our mindset has to shift around that. And sometimes it's going to be that we have to develop new skills around it. And sometimes we have to just come up with some brand new resources and some tools to navigate through some of these challenges. And so I have some thoughts. I want to leave with some maybe some takeaways, some things for us to reflect on. And for leaders, if you are a leader in your area of expertise, if there's a demand that you can't remove, like what can you do better to really support the needs, the drain that demand has? And so, like what might that look like? If I know that the workload is just too high, like I can't maybe change the amount of work people have assigned, but can I be more realistic about maybe timeframes or accuracy given the circumstances? If you're a worker and maybe you don't have as much authority, like where are you being asked to compensate for some of those missing resources, and how do you advocate for what you need? And see if you can change the system as well, because we all know closed mouth doesn't get fed. So, what do you need to advocate for change in your own life? That's what I'm kind of reflecting on right now. And lastly, what I would encourage us all to look at is what are some of those symbolic resources that we provide, or the things that are very performative, like the pizza party or break time yoga, or, fun fact about wellness. And how could we replace that symbolic resource with something that's more real? Something like additional clarity in your job description, some additional time to provide good quality work, or maybe a little bit more autonomy where you don't have to feel like someone's looking over your shoulder all of the time and be afraid to make mistakes. So that is where I would like to go with this. I don't have all the answers today, but I think it's a good starting point for us to start looking at it as a whole. And we all can take action steps to move towards something that is a little bit more connected, because I'm from the horse's mouth right now. Uh, Being burnt out isn't a good time. I'm not enjoying it at all. It's not fun for me. So, and it's very, very contradictory to who I am. And so I definitely know that there's some work to be done here.
Okay. And just one resource that I had that I wanted to share is the professional quality of life scale. And so it is, if you Google the professional quality of life scale, it will take you to the organization that runs it, and they have an updated version, and it's 30 question questionnaire that talks to you about the idea of compassion, satisfaction, right? And burnout and secondary traumatic stress, which we didn't cover, but it gives you a just a kind of an assessment of where you are on your idea of compassion satisfaction. Because if you have it, right, then it's worth it. If it where you are on your level of burnout, right, and your level of secondary traumatic stress, right. So a lot of times, you know, those things that we don't necessarily always understand or recognize, might mask something else, and it could be something that's very frustrating. But to ask yourself, just some added takeaways to what you're talking about, leaders, where do I help my staff feel like they're in the right place, right? Where do I help my how do I help my staff feel like their efforts are making a difference? How do I acknowledge that, right? Not just keep up the good work, or I don't want to stress out Tiff anymore by talking about rock stars, but just, where I can give specific feedback in a positive way. And how can I be supportive? How can I be more supportive of the fact that my staff is overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, and very often is under siege, not just by the people that are coming through the door, but also the lack of support from above as well. So these are important things to think about. These are takeaways, to think of those questions and really have a conversation, and then take a look at that professional quality of life scale. I put the link to the assessment will be in our course or in the description and also at the bottom of the screen here. So you all will have that as a resource. So to wrap up,
Yeah. Remember, this is a math problem, not a motivation problem. So, like, really do some research here. What is it that's draining you? What is taking away? And what is adding back? And if you can't eliminate the things that you're taking away, how do you amplify what's going to add back to that to bring balance back? And so it takes time, it takes work, and it takes energy. But I know, and I'll keep you all up to date. But it's definitely worth the effort because being down and being burnt out and watching it all burn down is again not it's not sustainable long term. And so we got to get ourselves out of the burning building. Period.
absolutely.
Period. And I'll just quote little Miss Brene Brown real fast. And you cannot burn yourself down to keep other people warm. And that's something I'm trying to recognize as well. So my burnout doesn't just impact me, it's eventually going to have an impact on the people I love and care about. So um, something to think about. Points to ponder there.
Yeah. And so thanks for being with us. And we'll see you in the next episode. And until then, I'm Carl.
I'm Tiff.
And keep
Keep
it
it
real.
real.